Have you ever just stopped and wondered how we do it? You know, how a tiny baby goes from just gurgles and cries to telling these incredibly complex stories in just a few years? It is, without a doubt, one of the most amazing transformations in nature. So, how do we really learn language? Let's get into it.
I mean, really think about it for a second. Your first language, it just sort of happened, right? You didn't study it, you just absorbed it from the world. But then you try to learn, say, French in high school, and all of a sudden it's verb charts and vocabulary lists and just work. It feels like two completely different things because, well, as we're about to find out, they really are.
And this, right here, is the absolute core of it. On one hand, you've got acquisition. That's the instinctive, unconscious way you picked up your native language. Kind of like how you learn to walk. You just did it. On the other hand, you have learning. That's the deliberate, conscious effort it takes to tackle a new one. Understanding this one difference is the key to this whole puzzle. Okay, so how did we first try to explain that magical unconscious acquisition? Well, the first big idea was surprisingly simple. Maybe, just maybe, we learn to talk the same way a parrot does.
Right, so this was the heyday of behaviorism, and its champion was the famous psychologist B.F. Skinner. He argued that language wasn't some special, inborn thing. Nope. To him, it was just another behavior like tying your shoes or riding a bike, something you form entirely through your experiences with the world. And when you look at it this way, it seems to make a lot of sense, right? A child imitates a word, they practice it, they get a smile when they say it right, and boom, a habit is formed. Simple, clean, intuitive. But this theory had one absolutely massive, fatal flaw.
And that flaw? Well, it led to a total revolution in how we think about the human mind. All thanks to one giant idea. What if we aren't born as blank slates? What if we're born with a language machine already built in? This is the million-dollar question. Kids are constantly creating sentences they've never ever heard. Think about it. A kid says, I googed to the store instead of I went. They've probably never heard an adult say gooed. What they're doing is applying a grammar rule, add ed to make something past tense. They aren't just imitating, they are generating. And Skinner's theory just couldn't explain that creativity. This is where the linguist Noam Chomsky steps in. He pointed out that the language kids actually hear is frankly a mess. It's full of mistakes, interruptions, unfinished sentences. You know, a parent might say, hey, could you grab the thing over there? He called this a poor stimulus. And yet, from all that chaos, every single child builds this rich, incredibly complex system of grammar. So the question is, where does that system come from, if not from the messy world around them? Chomsky's answer changed everything. He argued that the rules of grammar don't come from the outside world at all. They come from inside us. We are, in a very real sense, biologically pre-programmed for language. He called this biological gift universal grammar. And the best way to think about it is like this. Imagine your brain is a brand new computer. It comes with an operating system already installed. That OS has a basic framework for all languages, things like nouns, verbs, ways to form questions. Then, hearing a language like English or Japanese is like installing the specific software. It activates the system and sets the particular parameters. The machine you see was there the whole time.
So, this sets the stage for what should have been one of the most famous intellectual battles of the 20th century. Skinner versus Chomsky, the behaviorist versus the nativist. But here's the crazy part. The epic showdown you think happened, it never actually did. So here's how it went down. In 1957, Skinner lays out his life's work, arguing that language is just a learned habit. 2 years later, a young, pretty unknown linguist named Noam Chomsky publishes a review. And this review, it doesn't just critique the book, it absolutely dismantles the entire behaviorist worldview and basically kicks off the cognitive revolution. So, how did the great B.F. Skinner respond to this takedown that literally changed the course of psychology? Well, as he admitted almost 20 years later, he didn't. He didn't even read it. He said his students told him about it, and he was so put off by the whole thing that he just ignored it. And that's the unbelievable truth. One of science's most legendary debates was a battle fought entirely in print, with one of the main fighters refusing to even show up to the ring. The world of science changed forever, but the two titans never actually faced off.
So what does all this have to do with you struggling to order a coffee in Paris? Well, it all comes back to that language machine. What happens when we try to fire it up for a second time?
Okay, so this is a huge piece of the puzzle. The critical period hypothesis basically says our brains are like sponges for language, but only for a limited time. Up until puberty, that language machine is running at full power, just soaking everything up. But after that, the window starts to close, and learning a new language takes a totally different kind of effort. See, when you're learning as an adult, your brain creates something called an interlanguage. It's this really fascinating hybrid system that's not quite your native language and not quite your target language. It's the reason a native Spanish speaker might say, I have 30 years in English. They're just applying a rule from their first language system to the new one. And this isn't a mistake, not really. It's a natural, totally necessary step in the learning process. And when you put them side by side, the differences are just huge. Your first language is unconscious, it's powered by constant input, and it's driven by a deep biological need to connect. Success is pretty much guaranteed. Learning a foreign language, that's a conscious process. Your input is often just a classroom, and your success is, well, it's highly variable. In fact, some studies suggest that only about 5% of adult learners ever achieve that true native-like fluency. So if the machine isn't running on autopilot anymore, what does it take? Well, it really boils down to a few key things. Your natural talent for it, sure, but also your motivation. Are you learning for a job or because you fell in love with the culture? Your attention is huge. You can't just soak it up anymore. You have to consciously focus. And, of course, context. An hour a week in a classroom is just a world away from actually living in the country. So in the end, who was right, Skinner or Chomsky? Well, the truth, as it so often is somewhere in the middle. Chomsky was absolutely right that we're born with this incredible biological gift for language, but Skinner was also right that this gift needs input, practice, and reinforcement to really work, especially when we're trying to learn a new language as adults. Which leaves us with a final thought to chew on. We all have this incredible piece of hardware built into our heads, and while it works like absolute magic the first time around, learning a second language isn't magic. It's about figuring out the right manual to get that amazing machine humming again. The real question is, what does that manual look like for you?